Hello students, greetings from our coaching classes. Today's topic is life processes, chapter 6, class 10 CBSE science. This is part 1. So let us get started with this chapter. Life processes. Now, there are two words in this. First one is life and another one is processes. Now, what do you mean by life? Actually, this is kind of philosophical question. You must have heard many times what is the meaning of life, etc. All these things. But we'll focus on science or biology. And another one is processes or process. Let us try to understand this. Life. It is a condition that distinguishes animals and plants from other organic and inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. So before death, organisms show variety of characteristics. Okay, they have capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activities like movement, making sound, making noise, continual change. You know, change means what? Plants flower, they grow, people age. So many changes are occurring in body of an organism when it is alive, right? So life is nothing but the experience or state of being alive, and which is shown by living organisms. It's not shown by stone or table or pen, etc. Right? Okay. So what are the characteristics of living organisms? Growth, movement, reproduction, respiration, change, etc. So these are the characteristics shown by the living organisms. Now process or processes. What do you mean by process? Sometimes we say, okay, you have to process food before packing. Okay, if you want to preserve it for longer period of time, you have to process it. Then sometimes you say that, do you know the application process for this particular course or for this particular institute? Let us try to understand process. It is a series of action or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. So there are a series of actions. You take series of actions. For example, if you want to make a bread from dough, so you are making so many actions on this, right? Or if you want to apply to particular college or particular institute or particular school, you fill up the form, you wait for the merit list to be displayed. So there are processes. So that is particular process, series of actions or steps, right? Okay. Then it also means to perform series of mechanical or chemical operations on something in order to change or preserve it. That is nothing but the process, right? For example, last year you must have studied, there was a question, how will you make tea, right? In science. So you had to use various words or various concepts or terminologies like solution, solute, solvent, heat, etc. All these things. So you made series of chemical and physical or mechanical changes, okay, or operations on a particular substance. In this case, you made variety of operations on water, sugar, tea powder, etc. and milk to change it. These raw materials you change to tea. So these are nothing but the processes, right? Or process. Now, so many processes are happening in industries, right? For example, take an example of your chips industry, potato chips industry, wherein you get potatoes like we had discussed in this part in economics. So you take raw material inputs, potatoes, okay? These potatoes are washed, cleaned up, then the skin is removed, then it is cut into particular shapes, then they are fried, dried, etc., packaged under nitrogen to preserve them for going bad, etc., all these things. So many processes are happening in an industry or a factory for that matter. Now similarly, human body can be viewed as a factory. So you take up carbon dioxide, you release carbon dioxide, you take up oxygen, right? Then you eat food, this oxygen goes to lungs, it is absorbed, okay? Then you eat food, food goes to your stomach, it is digested, okay? Then it goes to intestines, then it is absorbed, etc. So many processes are done. Then waste material is thrown out of the body, just like as in case of the industry. So our body can also be viewed as a factory or industry. So many processes are going on over there. So these are nothing but life processes. And similarly, not only in human body, these kind of processes occur in each and every living organisms. Let the living organism be unicellular or multicellular. Let it be prokaryotic or eukaryotic, right? Okay, this little bit. Now, this is what bacterial cells. These are bacteria. Then what is this slipper shaped organism? Yes, this is paramecium. Then this is what? Amoeba, right? Now, bacteria, as we know, are prokaryotes. Your paramecium and amoeba, these are eukaryotics, right? But all these living processes, these processes are occurring in bacterial cell also, in paramecium also, and in amoeba also. Respiration, digestion, excretion, everything. These are occurring in these kind of organisms. These are unicellular organisms, right? Then this also occurs in plants. These kind of processes also occur in plants because plants are nothing but what? Living organisms. Although they are autotrophic, they are also made up of cells. Fundamental unit is what? Cell. And all these processes also occur at cellular level also. Then animals. In animals also, these processes occur, right? So point to note here is whether the organism is prokaryote or eukaryote, whether it is unicellular or multicellular, several processes are required for growth, multiplication, maintenance, and survival of this organism, right? Okay. And life is not possible without these processes. The life is not possible without these processes. Okay. All right. Before we go further, I would like to introduce to I would like you to introduce to one lady, Mrs. Grant. So Mrs. Grant, she is a process manager at Life Factory. Okay, so try to understand movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, nutrition, and transport. Mrs. Grant. These are nothing but the characteristics shown by living organisms. Some of them also are come under the processes. So always remember Mrs. Grant if you want to write characteristics of living organisms. Okay. All right. Now, what are life processes? How do you define actually life processes? You may pause and write down this. Okay. All the processes such as respiration, nutrition, circulation, excretion, etc., that are necessary for the survival and maintenance of the living organisms are known as life processes. Again, what are life processes? All the processes such as respiration, nutrition, circulation, excretion, etc., that are necessary for the survival and maintenance of the living organisms are known as life processes. As we have seen, these life processes are essential for each and every living organism. Let it be prokaryote, eukaryote, unicellular or multicellular. Okay, all right. Now we have seen that organization of multicellular organisms. So organisms can be unicellular like bacteria or protozoans, or they may be multicellular like human beings, plants, different animals like horse or bigger plant. So what is the organization? Cells come together to form tissues, various tissues with they come together to form an organ, then we have organ system, and then we come to the organism. Same is the case in case of plants. Now cells, they come together to form tissues, organ system, and entire organism. Now these processes are occurring at cellular level also and at organ and organ system level also. Now these are essential for the survival and maintenance of living organisms, right? For example, respiration. Okay, respiration, if you see higher organisms, how do they respire? Yes, with the help of gills or lungs, etc., right? But in case of unicellular organisms, the respiration process, how do they take oxygen in? By the process of diffusion. By the process of diffusion. Now here the respiration is also accompanied in case of multicellular organisms or advanced organisms. You breathe. We have seen difference between breathing and respiration. When you breathe, you take in air and oxygen is exchanged in the alveoli. Okay, it is absorbed at the alveoli. Here it occurs mostly by diffusion. Okay, all right. Now in case of single-celled organisms, no specific organs for taking in food, exchange of gases or removal of waste may be needed because the entire surface of an organism is in contact with the environment. So what does this mean? Now amoeba or bacteria, etc., they are directly in contact with the environment. They are unicellular organisms or single-celled organisms. Okay, they are suspended in the surrounding environment. Amoeba in water, ponds, etc. Bacteria maybe in water, maybe in your curd. Okay, they are omnipresent. Bacteria are what? Omnipresent. You can find them everywhere in any kind of environment. But the cell, and cell is nothing but entire organism, and this is directly in the contact with the environment. So exchange of gases or removal of waste, they don't need specific structures for that. Okay, all right. So gases like oxygen and CO2, etc., can be exchanged by diffusion. They can be exchanged by diffusion. Okay. Now, in case of multicellular organisms or complex organisms, however, the cells may not be in direct contact with the surrounding environment, right? So cells are not in direct contact with the surrounding environment. This situation creates a need for transportation system for carrying food and oxygen from one place to another in the body. So you may have respiratory system, transport system, etc. in this case. For example, for human beings, what do we have? Transport system, respiratory system. We have learned it in previous classes. Respiratory system or transport system. Now you're imagine the cells in your let's say muscles or muscle cells. They're not directly in contact with the environment, right? Air. They are not exposed. Or osteocytes, the cells in bones, they are not directly in the contact with the environment. So how do they get oxygen? They get oxygen by the transport system, connective tissue, blood. We call blood as what? Fluid connective tissue. So blood is carrying oxygen, okay, to these cells. So these different organ systems or different transport systems like respiratory system, etc. is required in case of complex organisms. Okay, all right. So try to answer these questions. These are there in your book. Why is diffusion insufficient to meet the oxygen requirements of multicellular organisms like humans? Second, what criteria do we use to decide whether something is alive? Very simple questions. What are the outside raw materials used by an organism? What are the processes would you consider essential for maintaining life? Okay, so we'll now consider these various processes essential to maintain life one by one. Okay, so this was end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. If you have any doubts, please mention in the comment box. I will try to respond to them as soon as possible. Keep reading. I hope this was useful for you. Thank you.